What's up, Coach TJ?
How's it going?
Going great. I'm really pumped about today's episode because, as per usual, we're going to be covering some hot or not questions, answering one of our athletes' questions, talking about how and why to build a 3-year training plan. It's a long time.
3 years?
Yeah.
Nothing. That's nothing.
Yeah, and how athletes can still kick butt in training even when they work a physically demanding job. So, some advice for all those blue collar runners out there.
Love it. Love it.
Cool. So, let's get right into it.
All right.
Hot or not, crunches.
Ooh. Do I want a beach bod this season or not? I mean, that's really the question we're asking here, right?
Okay, well, A, any body on a beach is a beach bod, and B, crunches, not hot. All those are good at doing is shortening your abdominal muscles and potentially increasing your back pain while doing absolutely nothing to strengthen the deep core that you need to properly use your limbs like levers.
Wow. That was a great
Yeah.
response.
So that exercise only targets superficial abdominal muscles in order to run really strong and well, to have like a strong trunk, great posture, and be able to use our legs for longer races, particularly races with long and sustained downhills. You really want to think about strengthening your core by using it in a functional way. So using it in the same way that you would while running. So I like exercises like flutter kicks, Supermans, planks, things that really target your deep core. And sometimes I'll have athletes say, but what if I get shaky? That's actually good. Those are called the phasic shakes. And that's actually a sign that you are training your core productively. So don't be afraid of the phasic shakes. Make sure that the core training that you're doing is aimed at being functional, not at looking a certain way. This is not the reason I train and work really hard isn't to look a certain way. I'm gonna look how I look in a swimsuit no matter what. I'm here to kick ass on trails.
What are the superficial people like myself to do, Zoe?
Well,
Am I going to have to do planks for the rest of my life?
Honestly, most of like abs is, yes, targeting superficial muscles, having a low body fat percentage, which I don't recommend for athletes who want to run healthy and be durable. Also genetics. So if you could go back in time and give your dad a condom, that would actually be a more effective way of targeting your abs.
Wow, that was something there.
We went
sure
there.
I want to acknowledge what I just heard.
That's how it's genetics,
You know what?
There's only so much you can do.
I've actually seen in athletes who do a lot of crunches, more side spurs. Mm-hmm. And I think it does come down to shortening kind of that abdominal wall.
Yeah.
And it does impact running form and posture. So I think my go-to for athletes would be the plank. That nice straight spine and working on keeping things in alignment. A lot of shakes doing that. It's a great way to build that deep core.
Leg lowers using the weight of your legs like levers. So leg lowers, flutter kicks, like star crunches. So when you like sort of lay on your back like a starfish. Well, these are different. You lay on your back like a starfish and then like come into like a little curled up ball and then you lower back down. So
you're getting that full range.
Getting that full range, and again, using your legs like levers, not just shortening your abdominal wall.
Will I get good abs if I do that?
You, who's to say?
Who's to say?
Good abs, not my goal, not my area of expertise.
Will I get functional abs?
Yes, you'll get super funky and functional abs.
Heck yeah.
All right, Coach TJ, hot or not, hiking as training.
Ooh, depends on if I want to get that beach bod or not.
Hike your way to a beach body. Again, if you have a body and you're on the beach, you have a beach body.
I'm all about hiking in all contexts. I'm not a hiker in like a hobbies sense. I don't use it for cross training either, but I like hiking in the context of trail running. And I like to really normalize that with my athletes. Hiking is part of the game.
Right.
And I specifically...
So you're talking about power hiking in the context of like an athlete encounters a steep section on the trail that is so steep as to be economically or to be inefficient to run or impossible to run.
Right. So you were reading my mind there. Put the power in front of that.
What about hiking as cross training or in the context of like going on a hike as part of your training regimen?
Yeah, I mean, I do that with some of my athletes.
What are the potential benefits of that? How much does it help in terms of augmenting aerobic base, and where might it be counterproductive in terms of spending a lot of time on feet with marginal aerobic gains?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Marginal aerobic gains. That's kind of right where I go to when I think about hiking. I'm almost using this with my athletes in the context of like a light cross training and or like recovery, or get an adventure that's different from the training that you're actually focused on.
Right.
I almost never use this as a supplement for doing like the actual running, or like a very specific cross training where you can actually get your heart rate up, like on a bike or an elliptical, in a pool. So this is kind of more when we're talking about hiking, like putting a backpack on and going out for a while. Yes, there is some aerobic benefit to doing that easy movement out for a long time. I mean, we really want to be doing like hours of this to really like accumulate any stress and fatigue. So can be useful in certain contexts, but not something I'm going to lean heavily on, because you can get much more bang for your buck doing other stuff.
It's definitely not the most productive stimulus. The goal with training is to get fitter. It's really hard to hike your way to improved fitness. You can run your way to improved fitness, and improved fitness will make hiking in the context of races easier and will improve your endurance for like those super like zone 1, zone 0 sort of activities as well. So hiking, not the same thing as running, but I guess neither of us is going to come down on the side of hot or not. We're going to end up where we usually do, which is it depends.
It depends. Power hiking is so hot.
Yeah. All right, TJ, hot or not, running with your hair down.
It reminds me of when we were on a photo shoot with Fred.
Oh,
and I was wearing a hat back in the day when I had pretty long hair.
Yeah.
And he did not like me running with the hat on, and he was just like,
let's get that flow. We got to get that flow,
get that
TJ.
flow going. I guess it's fun to run with your hair down. I don't know. I wear a hat.
I have a shit ton of hair. Like I literally got like it gets so hot. So hot.
That's why I don't grow my hair.
Yeah, I mean, I shaved, like, I got an undercut, and honestly, one of the best decisions. It did a lot.
You should just shave your head.
I feel like I lost a pound of hair with the undercut. I have thought about shaving my head.
You'd be more arrow, for sure.
I would definitely be more arrow.
You could just leave the bangs in the front.
I'm also, oh my God. I also know that I would look like my own little brother if I went full baldy. Running with your hair down, I have never done it. I will do everything within my power to make sure I never do it.
Just keep
Not hot.
What do you do? What do you keep it up? Is that what it's called? Keeping it up?
And well, yeah, I always like, I have such thick hair. I have to like constantly change my hairstyle. Like when I'm running 100 miles, I get headaches from like my ponytail being in the same position for too long. So I'll do like a high pony, and then I'll do a braid for a little bit, and then I'll like go back to a bun when I need to like squish it under a headlamp. So there is a hair strategy in my 100-mile race plan. But I also like, because I'm so nervous that I pop, again, really thick hair. I pop a lot of ponytail holders. So I like always get like so paranoid that I'm going to pop my way through like 5 ponytail holders in the middle of a 100. So I always run with like 6 extras on my wrists when I race.
I'm thinking here's a way to shave minutes off your next ultra PR. Just shave your head.
Sounds complicated.
Complicated.
I am able to run and braid my hair at the same time, because women are amazing.
We're talking minutes.
No, I don't think I lose that much time to my hair. If I really felt like my hair was, there's some lower hanging fruit than my hairstyle.
All right.
Running with your hair down, for me, not hot. For TJ, hot AF.
Love
that hair
this?
flow.
Do people do?
Yes. This is actually a subtweet of a specific pro ultra runner.
Oh, shoot.
So,
I feel like I know who that is.
Yeah, I feel like you do. But,
okay.
I just think that, I think it's crazy. That's my input. All right, TJ, hot or not, race expos.
Race expos. What the heck is a race expo?
Like, you know, when you go to races and there's like a packet. So have you ever done a road race ever?
No. Yes. Okay. No. Yes. Yes, I have. I've done I've done road 5 miles like 3 or 4 times.
This was like an Aspen though, right?
Yeah,
You've never
there
done
was-
like a big like marathon.
No.
So at big, I can't believe I'm explaining to you what a race expo is, but here we go. At big road races, the day before the race or a couple days before, like in Boston, it's sort of like at Western States. You know how the whole village is just like full of brands doing stuff with
Oh, yeah,
activations,
that
and
thing.
they're giving away swag. That's a race expo.
Got it.
And like, you know how it's huge at Western States?
Sure.
At like every other road marathon, it's like 18 times bigger.
Wow, is that hot or not?
So
No idea. I don't think it's hot. I think it's a waste of mental and emotional energy before a race.
yeah, that's kind of, I don't like being on my feet before races. I don't like being in crowds, kind of ever. And also I have a lot of environmental concerns about the swag that's given out. I know I always hate getting those like bags at races where they like foist a bunch of lubricant and gels that I don't like on me. I'm very picky about both my gels and my lubricant.
Take all the lube they've got.
You'll use whatever lube.
Body Glide or Squirrel's Nut Butter
Yeah.
is a new brand that
Yeah.
they gave us at Western States.
Yeah.
And now I'm
You're
all about
converted.
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it
so I
works.
guess it works.
Whatever's free.
Right, all about that free lube. I'm a little hesitant to fully endorse the Race Expo just because of the waste. I think at some races though, like at Western States, Boston, they do lots of really fun panels and activations. So sometimes I like the social aspect, but I would always push my athletes to just be really, really diligent around protecting their energy in the days leading up to races. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the energy and the excitement, and you spend all day walking around trying to get freebies. Before you know it, you've hiked 18 miles around the Race Expo before you even, run up the escarpment or run the Boston Marathon.
It catches up to you.
It does, yeah. So, Race Expos, I'm going to give it a solid meh.
Meh. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I like to check out a little gear here and there.
Yeah. So this next segment, I got this question from an athlete on the team, and I thought it was a really sort of poignant question. So particularly in trail running, elite runners oftentimes will be racing right alongside amateurs. I think this is one of the things that makes trail running so amazing and exciting is like, I'm never going to race in the elite field of the Boston Marathon. I would have to take like an hour off my marathon time.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Wow, thank you so much.
Just shave your head.
Just shave my head. I'm just one braid away from being an elite marathoner.
Think about that. That's probably 2-3 pounds.
It is probably like 3 pounds. It literally looks like a beaver tail.
There's a lot going on there.
Huge. Yeah. Anyway, so a lot of times in trail races, you have amateurs and elites running together, potentially passing each other, sort of like at Run Rabbit or at Javelina, where it's like a washing machine sort of thing, and you change directions a lot of times. Leadville with
Lake
the out
Sonoma.
and back. Yeah.
Any out and back race.
There's a lot of times where
Tons.
amateurs and elites collide, and that's sort of the context that we're bringing to this question. So the question is, as elites, how should regular athletes respond when you pass us on the trail during races? What can I do to make sure that I'm not in the elites' way?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And honestly, what I told this athlete was these athletes don't get to be elite because they're thrown off their game by having a couple amateur athletes in the trail in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. In my experience doing a lot of races at the front of the field, that are out and backs, typically, folks who are more in the mid pack and further back tend to just step out of the way. I appreciate that because when I'm kind of redlining, it's pretty hard to stop.
Right.
And I always think about that because I know that athlete that I'm like is maybe running at me and stepping to the side, or I'm catching up to and then asking, on your left passing.
Yeah.
I know that athlete is also trying to do the best that they can and is having, a day, and they probably don't want to necessarily stop for somebody, and that's disruptive of their race. And so I think, there's really no expectation.
Yeah.
For anything to happen there in my mind. I feel like it's whatever, I like it when people move to the side because obviously that facilitates my race. But I don't think like, it almost sounds like this athlete thinks there should be like an expectation for what is the right thing to do when I don't necessarily think that that's the case.
There is no expectation. I'll say I run into this the most when I'm racing in Europe, and it's usually European men that are just unaware and they get totally freaked out when a female attempts to pass them, and they get so weird and aggressive. I don't know if you've experienced this as well. It's probably different because we are different genders, but European men, not that fun to race with. It was sort of something I feel like I experienced in Argentina as well. I was trying to muscle my way onto the start line because I was in the elite field, and there were like 10 men in front of me who would not let me through, and I was really not loving that, and I ended up having to pass all of them in like the first 12 miles.
Well, to be fair, that happened to me at Western States. I didn't get up to the front fast enough, and so I started way too far back.
In the Alpine on that single track?
And it changed the trajectory of my day. Like, I should have been maybe like third line deep or something in the start line. Instead, I was probably like 12, 15 lines deep.
Oh, shit.
Like, I was in the I started that race in the mid pack.
Yeah.
And like, even losing, for a runner like me, being back like 30 seconds from the start is a significant disadvantage.
Yeah.
So even though the race is long, it's still, you have to expend so much more to catch up to the people that you're actually racing with. And I don't think it's a European problem. I think I
think it's a gendered problem for sure. I mean, it's been studied.
Okay.
It has been studied. You can look up until this year, actually, every year, there was a study that was done by She Races where they analyzed the gender composition on the start line of UTMB, and it was 90% male every single time. So
that's
this year,
not like a question of whether.
but it puts the women at a disadvantage.
I agree, but you also still see Katie Scheid at the front, Emily Hawgood on the front.
They were only at the front this year because this year it was UTMB policy for half of the start line to be women, and that's actually, in order to qualify as a Trail Sisters race, half of the start line has to be women. And that's definitely something that I look for when I'm racing, because it is so annoying to have a bunch of men in front of me who, like, no disrespect, but I am going to pass.
Right.
I'm pretty aware of my ability level. I am not a mid-packer, and I think that we can all help each other out and all lift each other up by sort of seating ourselves on the start line in a self-aware way.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with that. I think that that's right on. It is a matter of awareness, right?
Yes.
But not again, and this is probably like, I'm not going to take the gloves off on this. I try to see that people they're just not aware of what our experience is. They're thinking more about their experience in those moments. So like, when they go close to the front of the start line and then you can't get past them, they're not like looking at your bib to be like, oh, number 4 on the bib, like, oh, that person should be in front. Like, they're nervous. They're, wondering if they've got what it takes to finish. Like, they're in their world, and then also you are in your world. Like, you're wanting to get
correct.
front.
But again, and again, this is something that has been studied, and I'm only sharing my anecdotal experience because it coincides perfectly with the best available data, that a lot of times mistakenly people look at athletes in female bodies and assume, because of their gender presentation, that they are less experienced and less fast, and that just ain't true. So gentlemen, that one's for you. That's a freebie. I'll also say, again, to your point, being self-aware, and also just being safe and aware. Don't be bumping Charlie XCX so loud that you can't hear people who are trying to pass you. And I would also say to all of our athletes of every ability level, you belong at whatever race you've signed up for.
Absolutely.
You deserve to be there, and you deserve to take up space just as much as, F1, M1.
Yeah.
I don't care what your ultra sign-up score is. As an athlete, you are valid. You deserve to have a day that is respected and honored by your competition just as much as Courtney Dauwalter does. So don't be afraid to take up space. Some of the best advice in a respectful way, right?
I mean, I've literally had a man walking on a trail, a man walking on a trail not move while I'm moving at, many miles per hour faster, and he just did not move, and it caused me to roll my ankle, and I've had a bad ankle ever since. Yeah. And it, that whose fault was that?
His.
You know, like he could have moved. Like he was just walking.
Yeah.
I was racing, and I'm a little still pissed about that, to be honest. Like there are certain circumstances where like a front runner in a race who's, you know, passing people who are still on the course because of whatever that course design is, loop out and back. Yeah. Maybe there's like, you know, you're running a 50 and then the marathon starts later, so there's overlap. Whatever the case is, there are, you know, moments where the terrain is going to dictate the elite to step aside for somebody else. And I think that's really, in my mind, it's like the terrain tells you what to do and how like you're moving as an athlete. Like if I'm going downhill at 550 pace,
the person who's hiking,
you know,
should
the hiker
move.
needs to move out of the way.
Correct.
And I'm sorry to say that, and that might ruffle a few feathers.
No,
but
that is
way.
trail courtesy. And again, it should not be about ability level. I think what it comes down to is respect for your competition. Behave in a way that demonstrates respect for your competitors and respect for yourself, particularly for my female athletes who don't always see themselves represented on start lines, who don't always feel included in these spaces, who aren't prioritized, who don't have enough restrooms at European races. Don't hesitate to move up to the start line where you know that you belong. Do not let anyone else tell you how worthy you are on the trail.
Well, I would totally agree with that. And if you want to be, you know, in the front, and you want to start in the front in a race corral, go early and get up there. Don't expect people to move. Like, it's just one of the fundamental problems in humanity is that we lack the ability to see the self in us, so we can't see it in other people. And so when we're in our shit trying to deal with our pre-race nerves, get our stuff together so we can go do that hard thing, if we're not like together, there's no way we're going to be able to step aside for somebody else. It's just not going to happen. So as athletes, we have to also take some of this into our own hands and control what we can control.
Right.
Like if we can get there early, get there early. Like, you know, I actually see this as kind of one of the flaws in my warm-up routine, where it's like I like to warm up until 5 minutes before that race starts.
Doesn't work if there's more than 20 people racing.
Right. Take my jacket off and then go right to the start and be in the front. And it like, that's great for a regional Colorado race, but that doesn't work like in any race where there's several hundred people or if not thousands of people running, like at UTMB or something. You know, Argentina was another case where like, okay, just like,
I'm still mad about that. I've just never
front.
been treated so poorly on the start line of a race. I will never get over it.
I mean, okay, I'm going to say something. This probably is not popular, but whatever. I do feel like you're right. It is way worse outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
Like
it definitely 100%.
Like I don't understand when we went to that race in Argentina, I guess for lack of a better psychological understanding of what's going on with the individuals, but like the overconfidence of some of these athletes.
Wild.
It was crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like
again, I was wearing a bib that said elite on it. And I couldn't get to the front, you know?
I mean, it's just like my race is more important than yours.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude. And I think we can all do better to recognize that, like, the way we race and perform isn't just about us and our training. It's about the environment that we're cultivating out there and that we're collaborating with every single person during the race. It is a collaboration 100% through, like whether you're competing against somebody and that's helping you get the most out of you, or whether, you know, you run by somebody and they tell you good job, or you know, you tell them a good job. To the race, you know, to the people who are putting on the race and the volunteers, it's a collaboration start to finish. And I think some people, you know, they get so into the voices in their head and the nerves and the power of the moment that they really forget that. And it's like, okay, as long as I'm okay, this race is going to be fine. As long as I'm in my spot, it's going to be fine.
To that anxiety, particularly, I think people who've been socialized as female, they respond to that same anxiety by saying, like, I don't want to be annoying and like keep asking to pass, so I'll just hang back because they're nervous to ask to pass, or they're nervous to elbow their way to the front of the pack. So yeah, I guess, you know, we'll wrap this conversation up by saying respect your competitors and respect yourself.
Yeah. And if it's, if you can I think if you can step aside for an elite, that's great. But if the terrain or where you are doesn't warrant that,
Yeah.
it's everybody's, job to make a decision that puts everybody's health and safety at the forefront. And there's
Yeah.
no moments and there's no priority between, the race of a mid packer and the race of an elite.
Right. You
Like,
deserve to be there and
yeah.
have just as good a day as anyone else out there.
100%.
Great. Well,
Oh, that was fun. Can we keep talking about
good
that for a while?
stuff. All right. So the next thing I really wanted to chat about is the 3-year training plan.
Yeah.
So what this isn't is 3 years worth of workouts immediately uploaded into Training Peaks.
Training doesn't work that way.
Training does not work that way. I'm like maybe even a little bit superstitious because I've definitely had the experience as a coach where I'll be like so excited and gung-ho about an athlete's training that I'll like immediately program like a super intricate 12-week build. And then that's always when they need to go to 3 bachelorette trips and they get plantar fasciitis and their first son is born. Like that's the number one way to make sure that training gets hella disrupted is to get super married to a long-term training plan. But I also want to use this discussion to push people again outside of the understanding that training works in 12-week cycles. Yes, but also that if you really want to get good at this stuff, you really need to be thinking about the long arc of your athletic career in terms of a 3-year plan.
Look beyond the race you're training for.
Yeah.
I like to look at it that way.
Yes. Yeah. We used to call it lily padding when people just like train for a race and then they train for a race and they train for a race, but they're never actually training to build fitness. Yes, you're going to haphazardly accumulate some fitness gains when you're training for races, but it's much better to accumulate fitness gains and then channel those into races.
Yeah. So if we look at like a 3-year plan, we can kind of break it down into year 1, building foundation, year 2, increasing intensity and specificity, and in year 3, getting really into event specific prep so you can start to really push your potential at these events.
Yeah.
So why do we break it down like this? Why do we have that like long-term architecture?
Yeah, so ultra running isn't just in running in general. It's not just about being able to run far. It's about building endurance, improving efficiency, preventing injury, and managing the body's recovery over multiple days, weeks, and macro training cycles. So really breaking things down into a 3-year plan better allows for steady, injury-free progress while adapting to life's curveballs. Things like personal commitments, work, family obligations. When you really zoom out and give yourself that longer runway, things like last minute work trips, getting COVID, missing days, getting sick, inevitable injuries. Those things aren't going to throw you off of your game when you have that long runway.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
let's talk about the emphasis that we like to have in that first training year. So this is the year where we're really trying to build and solidify the foundation of an athlete's training. And our goal here is to really create a strong aerobic base and get the body used to consistent training.
Yeah. So training focus would be more on like that endurance training, easy runs, probably 4 to 6 out of 10 RPE if you're using that scale. So kind of shifting between those like recovery efforts and then those efforts that kind of push your high end aerobic capacity. And then I would probably also, consider in this phase, there's going to be some strength development, some speed development.
We're always working on speed. This is like, if you only ever do low level aerobic training, your base will get better and you'll probably get a little more efficient over time, but you're definitely not going to develop top end speed without a little bit of speed reinforcement in the form of strides or workouts.
And to also, just on that note, which I think is important, like if all you do is run easy, that will only get you so far as you can't grow that system past your other systems. So if you're not working on those other systems at certain parts of this training year, you're going to find yourself not gaining as much fitness as you could.
It's like a house with a huge foundation, but no roof. Like, great, you're not going anywhere in a mudslide, but next time it rains, ooh boy, not good. So the key components of, the year one foundational phase are, I think the long run becomes a really key part here, particularly for athletes that haven't been training systematically before. I think incorporating strength training for the first time for many athletes to help build muscular resilience and injury prevention depending on the individual, and honing those like really trail specific skills if an athlete wants to transition from road to trail running. So getting used to technical trails, getting used to power hiking, and just the more specific skill sets to trail running.
I like to have athletes focus a lot on patience during this phase.
Yeah.
And remembering that the aerobic system tends to develop faster than our structural or musculoskeletal system. So, we can't just can totally ramp up the training week on week on week.
Right.
We have to make sure that the musculoskeletal system is also adapting to the demands of the training. And so this is definitely probably a slower, more patient process. Year one is really fundamental. Again, it's building the foundation.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, that our energy systems develop quicker than our musculoskeletal systems change. So the key here is just because especially if we have an athlete who's coming from cycling, who has a pretty deep athletic background, or maybe did CrossFit or something and is quite fit, you can't just say, oh, I'm really fit, I'm immediately going to jump into super high volume training. No, you don't want your aerobic system to be cashing checks that your bones are not ready to follow through on.
Yeah. So year two, we're increasing intensity and specificity. And I think this is where athletes can really start to feel some of the magic of the training beginning to work for them. I think, particularly around that 18 month or maybe 500 days.
Yeah, love that 500 day club.
Zone,
we actually used to have a Slack channel called the 500 Club.
And it's true, because you've started to really realize that development of the foundation, and you've done enough of the fundamental workouts, but you haven't spent a ton of time at those intensity levels.
Yeah.
You've done what's appropriate for you, and the coach has gotten to see how you've responded to those phases of training. And then there's a higher degree of confidence that then you can take things to the next level, and you can increase kind of some of that duration of time, that intensity, which helps to elicit more adaptations at specific energy levels. And you're just basically, you're bringing that intensity up to kind of match where maybe the volume's at.
Yeah, so we're really focusing on that interval training, tempo, threshold work, hill workouts, and starting to really hone in on simulating those race conditions, running on that terrain that's similar to target races. And working on increasing that long run intensity. And this is where we might really start to integrate back-to-back long runs. So doing those consecutive long runs to sort of mimic the same physiological conditions that we get during ultra races. So maybe 20 miles one day, 12 to 14 the next, depending on the athlete's goals and background.
4-hour run and 2-hour run or something like that.
So this is really where things start to get a little bit more specific and a little bit more intense. But the athlete ideally has developed the base needed to support this intensity.
Yeah. I think there's just a couple other key components maybe to this phase of training is, athletes are starting to actively try to make improvements in certain areas. So they might see okay, my climbing isn't where I want it to be, so I'm going to focus on that skill. Or my technical downhill running isn't as good as it could be, I'm going to focus on that to try to bridge the gap between where I am and where I want to be for race day. And then I think there's also, a greater need for recovery now that intensity and specificity are increasing. So the athlete's really going to start to, in this phase, hone in more on foam rolling, stretching, specific strength. Maybe you're starting to see that they have some imbalances in some areas. Let's address those things and make that part of the habit and the routine. And then making sure sleep and nutrition are really on point as these back-to-back long runs become more popular in this phase of training. The need to really fuel very well becomes a top priority. So this is like a key skill an athlete's going to develop in this phase of training.
Remember, something I tell my athletes all the time is you can only train as hard as you recover. So if you're bringing your A game in training, that's great, but you got to be able to back it up with epic time on the couch, epic protein intake, epic stress management. Because if you're not if you're not meeting yourself in the middle, then you're basically just doing vanity training and digging yourself in a hole.
Yeah, 100%. Year 3.
This is where we really like athletes to get serious about competition, if that's what motivates them. Again, we work with a lot of athletes who competition is not a big part of their why. It's not a big part of their training structure. That's totally fine and valid as well. We love those athletes. Whatever motivates you is great insofar that it is authentic to you. But for athletes that are interested in racing, that third year is where we really, really, really start to drill down into the event-specific prep. So this is really where we're focused on like really peaking for those key races. And our training focus has really shifted to focusing on fitness for the race-specific demands. For example, if an athlete's event involves technical terrain and high altitude, we're really going to be focusing on incorporating those elements because they have 2 years of training behind them, and focusing on what in other scenarios could be marginal gains becomes a lot more important.
Right.
Heat training, technical work, things like that. This is where, again, we're really going to be finessing our race day nutrition strategies. Nutrition is a fundamental skill that we're focusing on at all times, but here's where we really start to like try to see like, okay, what, like this is where definitely athletes got to have that sweat test done, and they have to dial in their ability to take in at minimum 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour, and where we might try to see how do you feel if we do more. Not going to be appropriate for everyone. Always work with a registered dietitian nutritionist if you're going to try anything fancy.
I think there's also, in this phase, in order to have peak performances, there's the mental performance side of things.
This is huge.
Working on like the 5 key psychological skills, which we've talked about in other podcasts. Also considering like race strategy more specifically, considering how to cope better with fatigue, with heat from a mental and mental performance standpoint. But really like making sure that that system is in integrity with where the physiological adaptations are, because you can't have great performance without also being very mentally prepared and having the tools that you need to problem solve, to deal with the inherent challenges, to really stay uncomfortable for long periods of time. In order to get those PRs and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is also in training where we're really gonna start to fine tune and really, really hyper individuate taper strategies. Different athletes do well with different styles of taper for different events. I know I have started incorporating more intensity into my tapers, and that's been really helpful, doing a little more threshold work and some sort of like surges to get me nice and springy and primed before even long races like 100 miles. But still, reducing training volume for like to peak at the right time. This is also where I always like do meetings with my athletes ahead of their races to make sure that we're really engaged on those race day logistics. We're talking drop bags, we're talking gear, we're talking socks, crew. We're really getting into the weeds here. And again, getting into the weeds in this way becomes so much more beneficial when you have all the non-sexy stuff behind you to back it up.
Yeah, love it. Oh man, year 3 athletes. Whew,
that's the good shit.
Yeah, it's you can just really get into the deep on a lot of this stuff.
You know when you're talking socks.
Yeah,
we're going deep.
Are you lubing up your feet?
Yeah, let's talk foot lube. I actually literally did have a meeting with an athlete where we had a sustained discussion on foot lube, and it was a great use of time.
Nice, I love that.
Greasy feet.
Maybe
that should be the name of our coaching organization, Greasy Feet Coaching.
Greasy Feet Coaching.
Yeah.
Wow. It could I feel like it's like a dance coaching business.
Greasy feet.
Yeah, so you can like slide around.
Yeah, it sounds like a knockoff version of like a 1950s dancing movie.
Starring Fred Astaire.
Starring John Travolta, actually, is what I was feeling.
Oh, you're feeling John on that.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm not really
best
feeling
movie
John.
dance. He's the best movie dancer of our modern era.
You know,
Fred Astaire, OG, obviously.
Yeah.
Gene Kelly, great intermediary.
Ginger
Rogers,
Let's
classic.
get into the good
backwards
stuff.
and in heels. Yeah. Great. That's what people came for, is dancing tapes.
Think about how good they'd be as trail runners with that kind of footwork.
Ginger Rogers would be insane. Do you think she could do Western States backwards and in heels?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, we digress. Blue collar training?
Yeah, so here we really just wanted to talk about what it means to balance running training with a physically demanding job. So I'm thinking of my nurses who spend all day on feet. We coach people who work in construction. We coach people who work in landscaping, people who do manual labor.
Post office workers.
People who work in warehouses.
Yeah.
A lot of these folks are also really amazing high-level athletes. I think one of my favorite athletes who lives here in Carbondale is Joe D'Amore, who is like the multi-time world VK champion, and he like runs the Snowcat for Aspen. Like, he is like the most blue collar ultra runner that I can think of. He like, again, is one of the best in the world, but just loves like playing with tractors for his job.
Cutting trees down,
building trails.
Yeah,
we love a trail runner who dedicates their career to maintaining our public lands. But I always really enjoy following him on Instagram because he almost never shares things about running, but he shares a lot of videos of him pulling stumps out of the ground.
It's awesome.
Which is the content that we all need. But anyway, you can balance high-level training with a physically demanding job. You just have to be really smart and really strategic. This is going to be the least surprising take of all time on this podcast, but this is where hiring and working with a coach will become really, really beneficial.
Yeah, totally worth it. Totally worth it, because the energy expenditure and fatigue from these jobs is really significant.
Yeah.
And so understanding that the body doesn't know what the stress of a mile is. It does not understand the stress, like what walking around or getting stumps out of the ground, like it doesn't know what those things are, you know, like it just creates a reaction and activates your nervous system in certain ways, which can make it very hard to recover from training. So if you're always kind of in that work mode, your parasympathetic nervous system never has a chance to really be activated. So you're not getting into that rest state, and then that's where that's the state we need to be in to adapt to the training. So finding that balance and understanding that these jobs are stressful. What does that stress mean? And then also not stigmatizing the kind of like training you should be doing, because if you have a certain job and there's a certain energy expenditure that's correlated to that job, you know, the right training for you is going to look different than an athlete who, I don't know, maybe works in front of a computer all day. So I mean, honestly,
you know, I have gone to the chiropractor more times because of injuries from how absurdly poor my posture is than I ever have for sports injury. Like, the number one cause of my pain, and I fully recognize the irony of me saying this while I have just like absolutely the poorest posture. I just am always crouched like a lower primate over my computer.
You're just doing crunches at your desk.
I'm just doing crunches. My abdominal walls are short kings for sure. Irony. But I can't even remember where I was going with that, because anyway, my back mostly hurts because of sitting and almost never because of running.
Yeah, be active.
Be active. Don't just sit all day. Set a little reminder on your watch.
So let me steer you in the right direction here, Zoe. Does an active job count as training?
No, just because it's active doesn't mean it's productive stimulus. So I always want athletes to think about everything as stress. Almost nothing is neutral, right?
Yeah.
Like everything either is recovery and like sort of is something that like helps you empty your stress bucket, or it puts things in your stress bucket. And our stress buckets can only hold so much, but just because something isn't training doesn't mean it's not filling our stress bucket. So physical jobs do not replace training. I have had more athletes injure themselves dancing at weddings and doing yard work than almost anything else. Yard work slays athletes. It is why it takes
Unless
people
it's your
out of commission. Yeah.
Somehow there's a difference. The amateur yard worker. No one to call in the pros. But physical jobs don't replace training. Just because it's stress doesn't mean it's productive stimulus. Pulling stumps out of the ground, that's stress. Not that productive for training. Right. I think you can also look at like some of these jobs. Like I remember when I worked in restaurants.
I remember one night you Strava like a 6-mile service.
Yeah. Inside like a building that was like 650 square feet. I mean, like I would consider that to be a pretty high stress.
Yes,
and
but not stimulus.
But it wasn't. And it like wasn't like I was moving at a high enough heart rate to actually create aerobic stress on my aerobic system. And so but I did at that time, my coach, because I was doing that job 4 or 5 nights a week, and it was also very late hours, my volume was pretty capped.
Yeah.
And also in those years, I had some of my best ever race performances, including winning the U.S. Skyrunning Series.
Right.
So
because of serving?
No, because the balance in my training was
because of the
correct.
recovery. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one thing that people get wrong is that just because something is active doesn't mean it's effective training. So remember that these tough jobs are physically demanding. They're not training, but they're also not recovery. So we always want to be balancing the intensity of our work and making sure that it is specific to the training goals that we have.
Yeah.
So you were just mentioning how your coach helped you balance the timing of your workouts. Can you walk me through how athletes who have demanding sort of on their feet, physically active jobs should think about prioritizing or fitting in their training?
Oof. Well, let's take the example of maybe like a nurse.
Yeah.
Works like 3 10-hour shifts a week.
Yeah.
Those are like, okay, I'm only working 3 days a week. But those days are very intense. They involve a lot of care. There's a lot of movement back and forth to different places. So like in order for me to like start to understand how is this stress impacting the athlete, first it starts with the conversation about the athlete's perception of those stresses. So, okay, these days are really demanding. I start work at this time. I do this and this and this. Okay, how are your routines throughout the day? Like I can learn so much by what an athlete's not doing more than even what they are doing. So like, I'm not eating lunch. I'm not hydrating. Like, okay, so this is like really pushing your time availability.
Yeah.
That's what I hear there. And then a conversation around that. And it's like, okay, is it, and then you see what they have available.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm working 3 days. I can't even get lunch in. So I'm not going to have the athlete try to train on those days.
Right.
So we're going to try to maximize 4 days.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you feel the day after you finish your 3 days on?
Right.
I feel really wrecked. Okay, that's going to be the lightest day of the week, probably. Like, what do you want to feel going into work? Well, if work is really demanding, I need to feel fresh.
Yeah.
Okay, so our last day is probably going to be an easier day too. So that gives me a stress concentration of 2 high stress days in the middle.
So if you're only training 4 days a week, how is it, or is it possible to give someone both a long run and a workout and 2 easy days? So is it easy day, workout, long run, easy day?
It would be easy day, workout, long run, easy day. And I think that stress concentration is the key to getting that athlete to adapt. So putting 2 hard days back to back is going to force a lot of adaptations, as long as on the day after
enough
they're
recovered
actually
from the workout.
They're recovering well.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to recover 100%, but that's the point.
Yeah.
And then the day before they go back to work, that's such a light day, that starts to facilitate that recovery process. There's more time available in that day to rest. And you could also you could put the hard days on opposite ends too. It might depend on like what the athlete's overall bandwidth is. But something that can really help time crunched athletes is high stress concentrations.
Right.
Rather than spreading the stress out over a bunch of days, you just have hard or easy.
Right. Yeah.
And so we could kind of go back to that polarized approach that we talked to on the last podcast episode. But it's also really tough, like, because every demanding job is different, right? Like somebody might work 5 nights, like I did. And so they have all day. Yeah. And so like they can, like I could get up at 8 in the morning and be out on the trails at 9:30 and train for 90 minutes. And then I still had a couple hours to eat and rest before I go into work. And so like knowing that that was my schedule, okay, here's what you can do. And that's really the key. Like with my athletes who really work these higher stress jobs, they all work with me at a level of service where we're doing a call every single month to talk about the effectiveness of our training plan, the routine, the alignment of these workouts, because often with these athletes too, like their training schedules change every quarter, like because their work schedule changes a lot. They don't have the same stability as like someone who's going to the office and they do 9 to 5, or they do 8 to 4 or 8 to 6.
Right.
So those demands really require like that higher level of attention, and then the athlete, that there's a little bit more commitment on their end in terms of like the cost of working with a coach at that level, and then the time that they have to find to like have meetings and stuff and to communicate at a higher level, but it pays itself forward because they have that extra
because you're
level of
actually
detail.
able to train effectively.
Right. And it really makes a difference.
Yeah. I would say, for athletes with physically demanding jobs, the wrong place to try to cut corners is on your training. And I think another thing that I see athletes do that we need to steer away from is like breaking your runs up. I'll have athletes say, well, I don't have enough time to do my 6-mile run in the morning, so I'll do 3 miles before work and 3 miles after work. That is just a different stimulus. You're not getting nearly the same aerobic benefits, same like durability benefits, but you are undermining your ability to recover for the next day. So don't break your training up into 4 miles and 2 miles or 3 miles and 3 miles. Those are just different stimulus. It's always better to just do as much as you can in the time, or as much as is productive in the time you have available.
And I think you said it, like it's all about prioritizing like the high quality work and having intentionality behind everything you do.
Yeah.
Like if you have minimal time to train, you need to make the most of that time. And that's not to put like extra mental pressure on it, because like everybody, you're going to have good days, bad days, and days in the middle. And that's just part of the process. But you want to know what each day is serving,
right?
And why and how that's going to help you create the outcomes that you're looking for. So I think that just getting down to the nitty gritty on everything is just like really key, right? Like not flirting with the fluff.
Yeah. I also think a big thing that athletes need to pay attention to is their nutrition and hydration. Your caloric needs are going to be different if you have an active job where you're on your feet all day. And I know like we've worked with a lot of healthcare providers. We've both coached surgeons, nurses, doctor, like every, aspect of the healthcare industry. And I know it's really hard for folks to eat if you're in the operating room for hours and hours and hours. And gosh, I wish we had a system that better supported and served our amazing healthcare providers. But to the extent that you can, please take care of yourself the way that you take care of me when I come in. It's always so tough when I have people that are like, oh, I was just on my feet all day and I didn't eat snacks. Like easily available calories are good for you. Don't hesitate to reach for the things that you can eat while you're on your feet all day. Protein shakes, great. Protein bars, great. Having some snacks, having some
Pop-Tarts.
crackers and cheese, having a Pop-Tart. Just making sure that you are fueling your days in the OR, you're fueling your days on the hospital floor the same way that you would. Just treat yourself like the athlete you are. For the love of God, make sure you're hydrating. It's easy for us desk monkeys to just snack. Like my desk is literally littered with Halloween candy right now.
And drinks and smoothies and coffees.
Yeah, it's like a graveyard of beverages and Halloween
we should
candy.
have some all-purpose cleaning wipes over there.
I do have some cleaning wipes.
The mess.
Because I eat all of my lunches at my desk and it's always just like covered in soup and smoothies.
Well, I think it's a real privilege, and like a lot of coaches, I think fortunately have like had to work pretty tough jobs in order to like get to a place where they can like make it as a coach. And so they're, like a lot of coaches are going to have like that experience of knowing like what it's like to work one of these really demanding jobs. I did it for over 10 years. It's not easy, and it's very easy when you're stressed about going to work to forget about the little self-care things that you need to do to like get through work in a healthy way and then be able to train tomorrow. Like it's so easy to just like not bring your water bottle, not bring those protein shakes, not pack a lunch. And then, like it's just really easy. But if you want to get better, if you are actually committed, you're going to make the time, you're going to spend the time with preparation. And that's really key. Like just the 3 things that you can't skimp: sleep, nutrition, and hydration.
You can only train as hard as you recover.
Yeah,
that's the real big key here.
What about perspective here?
Yeah, so I think that, as much as there are a ton of challenges in having an active or a blue collar job, there can also be ways that it can be an asset if we shift our mindsets. So you can build a lot of mental toughness. I saw an interview where Rory Bozio, when she originally broke the UTMB course record, she had been working as an overnight ER nurse, and she was like, honestly, UTMB, pretty easy compared to working in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen a lot of people, like, again, Joe DeMore, it's a tough little motherfucker.
Yeah,
He's pulling
God,
stumps
what a
out all
beast.
day, driving heavy machinery up and down ski hills. Those are amazing skills that translate to amazing mental performance, amazing focus, amazing awareness and care of self. We just have to learn how to, again, balance them with the right recovery. Right recovery inputs. And again, you're less likely to have some of the drawbacks of Zoe sitting at her desk all day, like bad posture, muscle tightness. Something I see with my athletes that sit a lot is hamstring issues, because when you're sitting, your hamstrings are shortened. So
It's happening right now to me.
yep, both you and I have standing desks. Sometimes I get so tired I can't stand at my desk though.
That's the problem. Like today,
After a workout,
oh
I
my
just
God.
can't stand for that. Or like I can't. I don't know if maybe I'm stupid, but I have a hard time like writing while I'm standing. I need to be like fully relaxed.
I mean,
to
sometimes
like do.
that low level like work, that zone zero, is really nice for recovery.
Yeah. So for my sitting people, if you can stand, walk around, make sure your hamstrings aren't getting too short. Try to work on your posture when available. And again, you can only train as hard as you recover, and you have to be as focused on your recovery as you are on the work. So again, if you're an athlete with an active job, always be thinking about how you can better support yourself, how you can be more effective and impactful in your training. And it just takes strategy, preparation, and ideally someone who's on your side and in your corner to help you make those decisions as best as possible.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you've got a question you'd like us to cover, a topic for a future call, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Check us out on the web. We're on the internet, of all places, microcosm-coaching.com, and on Instagram @microcosmcoaching.
Yay!
See ya.